My name, Marshall 33, the engineer who built the engine but was never allowed to touch the steering wheel. For 10 years, I designed and perfected the core technology at Apex Offroad Solutions. Tonight, everyone in Detroit's high-end Copper Kettle restaurant assumed my father Gordon was about to announce my promotion. They were wrong. Gordon stood on the podium holding a glass of champagne, his smile wide and predatory. He didn't introduce me his own daughter, the one who just secured our biggest contract. He put his hand on my older brother's shoulder. Troy Gordon announced to the room, his voice echoing, "Will be the new CEO. He has the vision for the future. Marshall, you are a phenomenal technician, but you simply don't have what it takes to lead." My mother Anita squeezed my arm and whispered, "Don't make a scene, dear. Troy needs this more than you do. Your brother deserves the family business. You just don't have what it takes." I looked at my brother Troy 37, the man who let his own company crash and burn, now smirking as he accepted the title that was rightfully mine. I didn't flinch. I nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. The applause was a distant hum. I agreed with my father completely. I didn't have what they thought it took: the polish, the nepotism, the blind arrogance. What I had instead was something far more valuable. Something Gordon's cheapness ensured remained solely in my name. Before you dive into my story, tell me, what time are you watching and what city are you in? Let me know how far my story has traveled. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you don't miss how I tore their empire down. The celebratory feast ended, but the acrid taste of betrayal lingered, sharper than any expensive wine. I left the restaurant not for home, but for my private storage unit. The most critical asset of Apex Offroad Solutions wasn't the machinery. It was a small encrypted external hard drive I referred to simply as the black box. This drive held the legal proof and source code for all 52 patents I had personally filed over the last decade, primarily the ASC valve, automatic suspension control valve. The irony was almost paralyzing. I was the sole owner of the intellectual property that accounted for 90% of the company's revenue, all because Gordon had refused to pay the high-priced IP lawyer 10 years ago. When I first designed the ASC valve, a system requiring extreme precision and custom software, I begged Gordon to secure the patent properly. He scoffed, calling it unnecessary bureaucracy and claiming the company name on the shop door was enough. This happened right before I was 28, the year he told me to get out and stop embarrassing the family with oil under your fingernails, after I refused to switch to a non-technical marketing job. For 5 years, I lived off the grid, working at independent garages, honing my craft and spending every spare dime not on food or rent, but on filing and maintaining those patents under my name, Marshall Miller. I lived in a cramped studio in El Paso, Texas, eating canned beans while reading federal patent law books until my eyes bled. I learned that Gordon's refusal to pay for corporate legal counsel meant that any invention I registered in my own name using my own personal funds for the filing fees stayed with me. They thought I was gone forever. They treated me as a literal ghost, even removing my photos from the hallway. When I returned 2 years ago, it wasn't for reconciliation. It was reconnaissance. I accepted a non-management role just to observe the decay and monitor any legal changes. Troy's condescension had been relentless during those 2 years. He constantly joked about my lowly job and how I was lucky my family connections let me back in. I remembered him pointing at a complex flowchart I was analyzing. "See, Marshall. That's the difference between you and me. You handle the lines and boxes. I handle the big picture. He would often stroll into the R&D lab smelling of expensive bourbon and lean over my shoulder while I was calibrating the high-pressure hydraulic testers. You know, Marshall, if you just wore a bit more makeup and a little less grease, you might actually find a husband who could pay your bills so you wouldn't have to play with toys all day. I would just tighten the valve and stare at the pressure gauge, feeling the cold weight of the black box drive in my pocket. Every insult he hurled was another dollar added to the invisible licensing fee I was accumulating in my head. What he didn't grasp was that those lines and boxes were the legally defined boundaries of my private property. I had let them operate for 2 years without a formal license agreement, simply waiting for the moment when their arrogance would hand me the perfect legal leverage. I watched as they celebrated their technology at trade shows, Gordon standing tall, while presenting my ASC valve as the family's crowning achievement. They were building a skyscraper on a foundation they didn't own, and I was holding the deed to the dirt underneath. Now the quiet confidence held inside that black hard drive was about to become the loudest legal demand they would ever hear. Within 2 weeks, Troy had completely gutted the operational integrity of Apex Offroad Solutions. He wasn't interested in making better shock absorbers. He was interested in posting better financial metrics on LinkedIn. His first act as CEO was to fire 3 veteran mechanics, the most experienced hands who maintained the quality control standards. Overhead reduction, he announced, replacing them with temporary hires who lacked the understanding of the minuscule tolerances required for the ASC valve. The manufacturing floor instantly became chaotic and sloppy. The air, once filled with the rhythmic precision of high-end machinery, was now heavy with the sound of dropped parts and confused shouting. The real danger, however, lay in Troy's reckless pursuit of profit. He signed a contract to purchase a significantly cheaper lower-grade alloy from a shady distributor in Ohio for the critical shock body and housing the very component that contained my patented valve system. The change was horrifying. The metal was dull, porous, and visibly inferior to the aerospace-grade aluminum I had specified. I confronted Troy in his newly renovated garish office, my tone factual and urgent. Troy, the new alloy fails under extreme torsional stress by 20%. The housing will crack on impact during a high-speed desert run. We will be facing mass recalls, potential negligence lawsuits, and quite possibly casualties. Troy didn't bother to lift his eyes from his phone, where he was busy ordering a custom gold-plated espresso machine for the break room. Marshall, you worry too much. Engineering always builds in a huge safety cushion. I'm just cutting the fat. We'll save $85,000 a quarter on raw materials. If a customer drives their truck off a cliff, that's their problem, not ours. Besides, Gordon said you were just being difficult because you're bitter about the promotion. He laughed, a shallow, grating sound. His dismissal was a punch to the gut, not because it hurt me, but because I realized he genuinely believed the product was secondary to the marketing. When I went to Gordon citing specific metallurgical data and failure analysis simulations, my father just shook his head and poured himself a drink. Troy is implementing cost efficiencies. Your brother is trying to save the company, Marshall. You need to stop being so adversarial. You've always been too emotional about these technicalities. Go back to your lab and let the businessmen handle the business. Gordon's refusal to acknowledge the facts solidified my resolve. He was prioritizing the image of his golden son over the reality of his product. I returned to my small desk, but I didn't try to fix the production floor. Instead, I began a meticulous log, digitally stamping the date and time of every inferior purchase order Troy signed, cross-referencing it with the original material specifications. I documented the names of the experienced technicians Troy fired and recorded the exact date the cheap alloy began being introduced into the production line. I even took photos of the microfractures in the first batch of prototypes made with the new metal. I was preparing the prosecution's case, ensuring that when the inevitable failure occurred, every cracked housing and every leaked fluid would be traceable directly to the CEO, Troy Miller. The self-destruction of Apex Offroad Solutions was slow and painful, but Troy's arrogance ensured it was inevitable. I used this critical period of observation to solidify the legal foundation of my attack. My lawyer, Ms. Henderson, confirmed that the lack of the work-for-hire clause in my original contract was a legal certainty. I now needed airtight evidence of their intent to continue using my technology without my consent and their conscious disregard for my legal ownership. I designed a subtle legal trap using the company's internal communication system. I sent a formal email to Troy and Gordon, masked as a routine internal inquiry, asking to clarify the company's insurance policy regarding third-party intellectual property infringement claims. I specifically asked them to confirm that all ASC valve patents were considered internal company assets, and thus exempt from external licensing fees. Troy, seeing an opportunity to assert his authority, immediately replied, copying Anita. "Marshall, stop this nonsense. The ASC valve belongs to Apex. It was designed on our time. You are wasting company resources with these ridiculous emails. If you ask about this again, I'll consider it insubordination and dock your pay." Gordon's response was just as curt. "Everything you create belongs to this company, Marshall. You know this. Stop trying to find ways to blackmail your family." The documentation was now complete, a clear written confession from the CEO and the owner, stating their belief in ownership despite the legal reality. I knew they would fight, so I needed maximum leverage. My next move was to uncover the financial desperation fueling Troy's cost-cutting frenzy. I discreetly accessed a shared company drive where Gordon kept old tax documents. I found the recent loan documents from a private equity firm known for aggressive collections. The shock wasn't that they took out a loan. It was the collateral. Gordon had secretly taken out a massive high-interest loan using the company's real estate, the manufacturing facility, and the family home as security. The loan date coincided exactly with the time Troy's AI startup failed. Gordon hadn't just handed the company to Troy. He had mortgaged the family's entire future to bail out his golden son's failure, and now Troy was trying to make up the deficit through illegal cost-cutting and cutting corners on safety. I sat in my car that night looking at the glowing windows of the office and realized my father had gambled everything I built on a man who didn't even know how a hydraulic piston worked. This was no longer just about patents. It was about the impending financial ruin they were desperately trying to stave off by stealing my work. I quietly gathered my personal collection of reference books, and the only other piece of personal property I still had at the office, a framed faded photo of myself at 22, smiling proudly next to the first prototype of the ASC valve. I placed the photo face down in my bag and walked out, leaving nothing of Marshall Miller behind for them to claim. I did not go to the facility on the first Monday of the new quarter. Instead, I spent the morning at Ms. Henderson's office watching the clock tick down to 9 a.m. At the precise moment the doors of Apex Offroad Solutions opened, a registered courier arrived hand-delivering a heavy packet addressed to Troy Miller, CEO. This was not a discussion. It was a demand. Inside the packet were two documents that would trigger the company's economic heart attack: a formal cease and desist order demanding the immediate halt of all production and sales of the patented components, and a license agreement proposal demanding a 25% retroactive royalty fee on all sales generated by the patented technology over the past 3 years. The fee was substantial, an impossible sum given the collateralized loan Gordon had just secured. The phone calls started instantly. Troy called first, his voice a high-pitched snarl of disbelief that vibrated through the speaker. "Marshall, you spoiled bitch. Are you out of your mind? This is ridiculous. You have 30 minutes to retract these damn papers before I have your ass sued for defamation and fired for gross misconduct." I didn't say a word. I simply hung up and let his subsequent increasingly frantic voicemails record the evidence of his rising panic. He sounded like a cornered animal shifting from threats to insults within seconds. Gordon followed his voice, deceptively controlled, but vibrating with menace. "Marshall, you get down here right now. We need to talk this through as a family. You cannot do this. You are destroying 35 years of my hard work over a technicality. Have you no shame?" I responded only via certified email copying Ms. Henderson. Subject: cease and desist order. The body was concise, leaving no room for negotiation. The documents are legally binding. Continued production of the patented systems constitutes willful infringement. You have 30 days to secure financing and sign the licensing agreement, or I will sell the exclusive perpetual license to the highest bidder. The final and most devastating move of the morning was made by Ms. Henderson. She dispatched the same legal packet along with my full CV and a summary of my legal ownership to Summit 4IC4, our largest competitor. I had just turned my family dispute into a public industry-wide auction of their core existence. I imagined Troy's face turning purple as he realized that the lines and boxes I handled were now the only things keeping the bank from taking his gold-plated espresso machine and his CEO chair. The anticipated dramatic confrontation arrived that same evening. My doorbell rang incessantly, followed by a persistent, desperate knocking that sounded like it would splinter the wood. When I opened the door, Anita burst through the threshold, ignoring my boundary, immediately launching into her emotional performance. "Oh, Marshall, you have to stop this. Your father is shaking. He's pale. He needs his medication. Are you trying to kill him with stress? Is this what you want to be, the daughter who murdered her father for a patent?" She didn't seek resolution. She sought immediate capitulation through guilt, using her tears as a weapon. Gordon stumbled in behind her, gripping the doorframe for support, looking every bit the victim she described. "I never should have let you study engineering," he wheezed, leveraging his staged frailty. "This is the result. You have no heart. You're just like your grandfather, cold, greedy, and soulless." I remained standing, a wall of impassivity in my own home. "Don't bother, Anita. Your performance is unconvincing. And Gordon, don't insult my intelligence. This isn't about my grandfather. This is about you prioritizing Troy's failed dreams over the solvency of your own business and the safety of your customers." Anita rushed forward again, attempting to grab my hands. "But we love you, Marshall. You are our daughter. You are ruining your brother's future." He was finally doing something great. "We were only trying to protect you from the business risks by keeping your name off the paperwork." "Protect me?" I asked, my voice dangerously low, stepping back from her reach. "You protected me by telling me to get out of your life 5 years ago. You protected me by letting Troy mock my work for 2 years while I was the only one actually making this company money. You loved me when I was doing unpaid work. You loved me when I was quiet and compliant. Now you fear me because I know the law better than you know your own children." Gordon, seeing the manipulation failing, finally snapped and revealed the true depth of their desperation. "We can't pay the retroactive fee, Marshall. The cash isn't there. The company is mortgaged to the hilt. We are fighting for our lives. If you don't drop this, we lose the house." His voice cracked the facade of the powerful patriarch, finally crumbling into pathetic desperation. I met his gaze, completely unmoved by his terror. "That is not my problem, Gordon. That is the cost of your favoritism and Troy's incompetence. You chose to bail out Troy with the family's assets. I chose to protect my personal assets. This is the difference between an asset and a liability." Anita began weeping inconsolably, pressing her face against my front door. "We are going to lose everything. Please, you are family." I delivered the final ruthless refusal, cutting the tie completely. "You both declared me dead 5 years ago. I am simply holding the funeral now. I will not withdraw the demand. You have 29 days left." I opened the door, motioned for them to leave, and shut it firmly behind them. The 29 days passed in a tense, cold silence. Marshall did not budge. Troy, facing financial and legal oblivion, reacted with predictable panic and recklessness. He believed that the lack of immediate federal action meant Marshall was bluffing, or that he could outrun the law. He ordered the remaining skeleton crew to drastically increase production of the now illegal ASC valve systems, working 3 shifts a day. He switched completely to the cheapest possible overseas supplier, instructing them to relabel the components with "Made in USA" stickers to hide the source and bypass my patents. This was the final, unforgivable mistake that crossed the line from corporate dispute to federal crime. I did not wait for the deadline to expire completely. 3 days before the 30-day mark, Ms. Henderson executed the agreement with Summit 4R4, making me their new head of R&D and officially granting them the exclusive license to all 52 patents. Summit's legal team, backed by a billion-dollar war chest, immediately filed an aggressive federal injunction against Apex, citing willful and repeated patent infringement. But the fatal blow came from the paper trail I created. I forwarded all the original documentation, the photos of the substandard metal Troy's signed purchase orders for the fake stickers, and the manifest of the newly imported fraudulently labeled components to my contacts within the FTC and CBP. My report was detailed, irrefutable, and devastating. I provided the exact container numbers and the arrival date at the port of Detroit. One crisp afternoon, 6 black SUVs from various federal agencies, including Customs and Border Protection and the Department of Commerce, descended upon the Apex facility. The entire facility was declared a restricted zone. Troy, who was trying to personally supervise the loading of a massive shipment intended for a major distributor, was publicly detained and questioned in front of his remaining staff. The federal agents issued a writ of seizure on all remaining inventory that contained the patented technology. The sight of federal agents hauling crates out of the warehouse was captured by local news and spread through the automotive industry like wildfire. Major clients, upon receiving the official notifications of federal seizure and impending fraud charges, immediately invoked the force majeure and cancellation clauses. The massive $2 million contract I had secured, the one that should have saved them, was revoked within hours. Apex Offroad Solutions, now completely paralyzed, facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit from Summit 4R4 and federal fines for fraudulent import practices, had zero revenue and massive immediate legal exposure. Troy's attempt to secretly flood the market had resulted in the public spectacular destruction of the company's reputation. Gordon and Troy could not even access their bank accounts, which were frozen as potential assets in the federal fraud investigation. The phone calls from my family ceased, completely replaced only by tersely worded letters from their rapidly cycling low-cost legal defense, who were already advising them to prepare for bankruptcy. Approximately 2 years passed. I had moved to a new city now, working out of Summit 404's state-of-the-art R&D center, a space dedicated entirely to innovation. My name, Marshall Miller, was recognized in the industry, attached to successful new product launches and prestigious technical conferences. Apex Offroad Solutions had been liquidated, its assets sold at a public auction to cover debts and satisfy legal judgments. I made sure Summit 404 acquired the old Detroit manufacturing facility, not for use, but to prevent anyone from operating under the disgraced name. One late afternoon, while driving back to my new home, I took a deliberate detour through my old neighborhood. The large colonial-style house that once represented Gordon's pride was fenced off. A foreclosure notice was tacked prominently to the front door, flapping in the wind. Standing by the curb, attempting to load a few battered boxes into a rusty van, were Gordon and Anita. Troy was arguing fiercely with a bank representative, his expensive clothes gone, replaced by worn denim, and a look of pure, defeated desperation. They looked aged, beaten, stripped of the facade they had maintained for decades. They saw my vehicle, a sleek, brand-new, customized Summit 404 prototype, a machine that reeked of success and engineering perfection. Gordon's eyes met mine across the street. The look in his eyes was not hatred, but a horrifying, hollow comprehension of the absolute finality of his loss. I could have stopped the car. I could have rolled down the window and offered a final, cruel word. But I didn't. I simply pressed the accelerator and continued driving, leaving the patent-stealing history and the people who had abandoned me behind me forever. This wasn't just revenge, it was a demonstration. My family's downfall was not my doing. It was the inevitable consequence of their own fatal flaw, the arrogant belief that competence, the actual ability to build and sustain, could be entirely subordinate to favoritism and image. They chose to prioritize the golden sun's ego over the engineering reality. I simply held the mirror up and allowed the full weight of the law and reality to crush them. The business didn't fail because I took the patents. It failed because they fundamentally believed the engineer who created the product did not have what it took to control it. I built my empire on my own terms, and they gained nothing but the crushing truth of their own incompetence. Thank you for hearing my story. If you have ever been told you don't have what it takes, please find courage in knowing that your quiet, documented competence is always the most powerful weapon. Drop a comment below and tell me, what is the most powerful skill you secretly own that others undervalue? Don't forget to